For 11 years, I played the lucky wife to Denver's rising CEO. Tonight, in the city's finest ballroom, my husband told me to politely step aside for the woman carrying his child. The room waited for me to collapse. They did not know the building, the company, even his chair, were controlled by my fund. I did not cry. I launched a campaign. The country will soon know who was truly lucky to marry whom. My name is Olivia Grant. I am 37 years old, and tonight I am wearing an ivory-colored silk dress that feels as thin as a prayer against the high-altitude chill. The dress, I note with a detached sort of irony, is the color of old wedding gowns. It clings to my skin as I step out of the private elevator and onto the rooftop terrace of Echelon 32. We are here, supposedly, to celebrate 11 years of marriage. Echelon 32 is the kind of restaurant that exists purely to validate the egos of men like my husband, Daniel Hayes. It is a glass box perched 32 stories above downtown Denver, exclusive to the point of absurdity, requiring reservations booked months in advance unless, of course, you are Daniel. The city lights sprawl below us, a galaxy of captured stars. But no one here looks at the view. They are all looking at each other. I had hoped for a quiet table for two, a shared bottle of wine, a conversation that did not revolve around market caps or fourth-quarter projections. I had hoped, foolishly, for an anniversary. Daniel, naturally, turned it into a networking opportunity. The table is not set for two, it is set for 9. Olivia, darling, Daniel says, his hand not touching me, but hovering possessively near the small of my back. He steers me toward the long table, his voice projecting for the audience he has assembled. You know everyone. I do. There is Marcus, his vice president, whose eyes flicker constantly to Daniel, hungry for approval. There is Cynthia, the PR consultant, whose smile is so bright and tight it must be surgically attached. There is the new corporate counsel, a man whose name I have already forgotten, who looks like a predator poured into a bespoke suit. A few major clients, laughing too loudly at Daniel's non-existent jokes. And then there is her, Lena Carver. She is 32 years old, the new director of strategic branding, hired 8 months ago. She is beautiful in the way a freshly sharpened knife is beautiful, all sharp angles and dangerous polish. She is wearing a crimson dress that contrasts my ivory perfectly, a strategic move in a war I had not yet consciously acknowledged. Daniel seats me, not at his side, but one seat down, placing Lena directly across from me. A power play. Everything is a power play. For the first hour, I perform the role I have perfected for 11 years, the supportive, smiling, silent wife. I nod. I sip my water. I feign interest in a discussion about freight logistics, while Daniel holds court, the charismatic CEO, the visionary, the man who built an empire. He has been scrolling through his phone for 10 minutes, his thumb moving in sharp, angry little swipes, while Marcus drones on. I make the mistake of trying to pull him back to the present, back to us. Daniel, I murmur, just loud enough for him to hear. It's a beautiful evening, for our 11th. He does not look up from the glowing screen. His voice is low, bored, and laced with the casual cruelty that has become his native tongue. You really are lucky I married you, Olivia, he says. The words are almost an afterthought, a piece of lint brushed off his lapel. Who else would be this tolerant of you? Tolerant, the word hangs in the air between us, suffocating. Tolerant of my quiet nature. Tolerant of my preference for the library over the limelight. Tolerant, I know he means, of my failure to produce the air he so desperately desires. The insult is precise, delivered to inflict maximum damage with minimum effort. It lands, as it always does, right in the softest part of my chest. I do not respond. I simply pick up my wineglass, studying the dark red Cabernet as the waiter circles the table, refilling glasses. This is the moment Lena chooses. The wine has just been poured. The ambient clatter of the restaurant seems to pause, drawing a collective breath. I have an announcement, Lena Carver says. Her voice is not loud, but it slices through the conversational hum. She stands up. Slow and deliberate, she is glowing. I realize with a cold, sinking clarity that it is not just the candlelight. She holds up her left hand, a diamond, impossibly large and aggressively new, flashes on her ring finger. It catches the light from the city below and throws it back, a beacon of defiance. Daniel and I are getting married. The silence that falls over the table is absolute. It is a heavy, pressurized void, the kind of silence that precedes a catastrophic failure. Marcus freezes, his wineglass halfway to his lips. Cynthia's surgical smile twitches, then locks. The corporate lawyer stops breathing. Every single person at that table, clients, executives, staff, turns their head, not to Daniel, not to Lena. They turn to me. They are waiting. They are vultures, starved for the drama, waiting for the carcass. They expect the tears. They expect the screamed accusations. They expect me to throw my wine, to upend the table, to run from the room sobbing, fulfilling my role as the publicly humiliated wife. Lena smiles. She knows what they are waiting for, too. She looks directly at me, her eyes shining with triumph, and delivers the final, killing blow. And, she says, placing her other hand over her stomach, I'm pregnant. She does not break eye contact. She wants to watch me shatter. He deserves a real family. Olivia. There it is, the implication laid bare. A real family, the one I could not provide, the ultimate justification for her theft. I turn my head, slowly, to look at my husband. Daniel is pale. He is standing now, though I do not remember him rising. He is staring at Lena, his jaw tight, his eyes wide with a specific kind of panic. This is not the look of a man caught in a lie. This is the look of a man who has lost control of the narrative. He knew about the affair. He knew about the pregnancy. He clearly did not know that Lena would choose to announce it like this, in a glass box, 32 stories in the air, in front of his entire leadership team. He thought he could manage this, handle it in private, the way he handles all his messy acquisitions. He forgot that Lena Carver is not a quiet asset. She is a hostile takeover. I feel a strange, cold calm settle over me. The pain is there, a deep, frozen ocean far beneath the surface, but it is not what guides me. What guides me is a script I did not even know I had memorized. I do not cry. I do not scream. I lift my wineglass. My hand is perfectly steady. With one manicured fingernail, I tap the side of the crystal. A single, clear ting cuts through the suffocating quiet. The table looks back at me, baffled. Congratulations, I say. My voice is flat, empty. It offers them nothing. To you both. I place the glass back on the table. I gather my small silk clutch. I stand up, the legs of my chair making a soft, polite scraping sound on the marble floor. Daniel finally looks at me, his eyes pleading, confused, angry. Olivia, don't. I look at him, and for the first time in 11 years, I smile a smile he has never seen before. It is not warm, it is not forgiving, it is the smile of a lock clicking into place, of a contract being finalized. It is the smile of a stranger. I turn and walk away. I walk past the frozen tableau of our dinner party. I walk past Lena, who looks, for the first time, uncertain. I walk past the sommelier, who lowers his eyes respectfully. The ride down the private elevator is silent. The air is still. When the doors open to the ground floor lobby, the doorman, a kind man named Miguel, steps forward. He does not greet me as Mrs. Hayes. He never has. Ms. Grant, he says, his voice warm, holding the door. It's a cold night. Be careful on the roads. Thank you, Miguel. I will. I step outside. The Denver air is thin and bites at my bare shoulders. The first few flurries of an early snow are beginning to drift down, melting on the dark pavement. The valet captain rushes over, ignoring the line of other waiting patrons. Daniel always uses the company driver, a black sedan that waits for him like a loyal dog. I have always driven myself, The captain does not ask for my ticket. He knows my car. He presses the keys into my palm. Your Range Rover, Ms. Grant, already warmed up. I nod, pressing a bill into his hand. Thank you. Ben. I slide into the driver's seat. The leather is warm. The cabin quiet. I put the car in gear and pull away from the curb, the windshield wipers sweeping away the first dusting of snow. In the rearview mirror, I see the glass box of Echelon 32, 32 stories high, glowing against the dark sky. I do not see Daniel. I do not look back again. I do not drive toward Greenwood Estates, the sprawling, sterile white suburban palace that Daniel calls his house, holds no comfort, only the ghosts of 11 years of carefully managed silence. The snow is sticking now, blurring the city lights into watercolor smears as the Range Rover cuts through the empty downtown streets. My hands are steady on the wheel. I am not driving home. I am driving to work. The headquarters of Aurora Continental Freight looms out of the darkness, a black glass and steel monolith that scrapes the sky. It is Daniel's monument to himself, or so he believes. I bypass the heated executive garage, where his driver would be waiting patiently, and pull into a reserved slot near the service entrance, a spot marked only with a faded numerical designation. The main lobby is vast and empty at this hour, smelling of industrial cleaner and cold marble. The night guard, Arthur, is an older man who started with my father, back when the company was just 3 battered container trucks and a rented office on the edge of town. He looks up from the small television at his desk. He does not see a betrayed wife in a ruined silk dress. He sees the bloodline. Ms. Grant, he says, his voice a gravelly comfort. He buzzes the internal door lock without me having to ask. Working late? It is not a question. Just tying up a few loose ends. Arthur, have a quiet night. You too. Ma'am. He calls me Ms. Grant. He has always called me Ms. Grant. Daniel tried to correct him once, years ago, at a company holiday party. It's Mrs. Hayes. Arthur, she's my wife. Arthur just stared at him, his eyes flat and unimpressed, until Daniel flushed and looked away. I walk past the main bank of gleaming elevators. Their digital displays show the building directory, glowing with Daniel's carefully crafted branding. The penthouse, floor 27, is listed simply as Office of the CEO. That is Daniel's stage, the glittering glass box where he performs his role as the visionary. I walk to a plain, unmarked alcove, hidden behind a panel designed to look like part of the wall. I pull the black, unbranded keycard from a hidden pocket in my clutch. I swipe. A heavy, soundproof door slides open, revealing a small, freight-style elevator. The interior is brushed steel and smells faintly of machine oil. There is no panel of numbers. There is only one button, a polished silver disc engraved simply 28A. Floor 28, A does not exist on any blueprint available to the public or to the CEO. The elevator moves with a solid, mechanical hum, and the doors open directly into the room. There is no hallway. The air is still, thick with the scent of old leather, heavy floor wax, and the faint, phantom smell of my father's cigars. A scent no amount of cleaning in the past 12 years has ever managed to scrub from the wood. This is Harold Grant's office. It is a fortress of dark walnut paneling and floor-to-ceiling glass, thick enough to mute the city to a silent, glittering map. A massive, imposing desk, clear of all clutter, faces the door. Behind it, built into the wall, is the black steel face of a bank-grade vault. Daniel has seen this room only once, from the doorway, 12 years ago. He called it a mausoleum and refused to enter. He has never been invited back. I stand in the dark, the snow falling in hypnotic silence outside the window. The memory rises, not as a fog, but as a sharp, clear pane of glass. 12 years ago, I was 25 years old, married to Daniel for just over 1 year. My father had been dead for 3 days, gone from a sudden, massive stroke on the 7th hole of the Cherry Hills golf course. I was drowning in black crepe, casseroles from neighbors, and the suffocating weight of condolence cards. After the funeral, after the public reading of the will where I, Olivia Grant, received the Greenwood Estates house and a generous trust fund, and where Daniel Hayes received a polite nod, our family lawyer, Mr. Cole Harrington, took my elbow. "There is one more thing, Olivia," he said, his voice low. He steered me away from the mourners, away from Daniel, who was already accepting sympathies, as if he were the new head of the family. Harrington led me here, to this elevator, to this room. I had been married to Daniel for 12 months. He was brilliant, charming, handsome, and ambitious. I still believed his ambition was for us. I still thought he was a gifted businessman, someone my father would have been proud of. Harrington unlocked the vault with a key he wore on a chain around his neck. He pulled out a single, heavy, leather-bound folio. "Your father," Harrington said, his voice quiet but firm, "did not leave you a title, Olivia. He left you control." He spread the documents on the walnut desk. They were not complex, just elegant and brutal. Aurora Continental Freight, the public-facing company Daniel was already angling to lead, was nothing more than an operating subsidiary, the real company, the entity that held the land. The fleet, the contracts, and the name was a holding company, Grant Venture Holdings. It controls 63.8% of the voting stock. Olivia, and you are the sole director of the fund. You, and only you. He handed me a handwritten letter from my father. The stationery was thick, his handwriting bold and impatient. "Livy," it read, "don't fight men for the spotlight. It's what they crave. It makes them sloppy. Let them think they're the driver. You own the road. Now." I shed my wrap, letting it fall onto one of the heavy leather chairs. The ivory silk of my anniversary dress feels profane in this room. I walk behind the desk. It does not feel like trespassing. It feels like sliding into my own skin. I press my thumb to a small, hidden scanner on the desk's surface. A panel in the desk slides open, revealing a hardline terminal connected directly to the company's core server. Not the cloud-based system Daniel and his IT team use. This is the mainframe, the bedrock. I log in. My credentials are not O. Hayes. They are H. Grant, Admin, 01. I have access to everything. The encrypted financials, the real-time fleet logistics, Daniel's corporate email, Lena's. I see the file immediately. It is in a restricted folder, tagged for board review in 2 weeks. Restructuring 2026, final. PPTX. The authors, D. Hayes, L. Carver. My hand is perfectly steady as I click the file. It is a 120-slide presentation. It is not just a restructuring, it is a purge. Page after page details their plan, a new brand identity, a move toward a leaner, agile workforce. Then I see the names: Arthur, the night guard, fired, replaced by a third-party security firm; Sandra Webb, our head of accounting, who has been with us for 30 years, who taught me how to read a balance sheet; fired, position listed as redundant; Marco Lewis, my father's first driver, now the yard manager for our entire Western fleet; fired, reason listed as outdated operational practices. They are systematically erasing every person loyal to Harold Grant. They are gutting the company, cutting out its heart, and replacing it with their own people. Funded by the IPO. Daniel has been planning behind my back. The humiliation at the restaurant was an emotional betrayal. This is sacrilege. My movements are precise. I do not delete their file. I download it. I open a secure connection. I pull the original, unassailable documents from the vault's digital backup, the full ownership structure of Grant Venture Holdings, the articles of incorporation, my father's letter. I bundle them. I encrypt them. I open a new message to Cole Harrington's private email. He is 75 years old now, but he is still my lawyer, and he still checks his messages every hour. The subject line is blank. The body of the message contains only 4 words. Activate Aegis Protocol. I hit send. The humiliation I felt at Echelon 32 feels distant now. A thin, high-frequency sound. That was an attack on Olivia Hayes, the quiet, childless. Lucky wife, this attack, the one documented on this server, was an attack on Olivia Grant, the daughter. Daniel and Lena thought they were dealing with the wife. They forgot, or perhaps they never knew, about the daughter. I stand up and look out the window of floor 28A. The snow is heavy now, covering the city in a clean, cold sheet of white. The public humiliation at dinner was not the start of my collapse. It was just the final, necessary authorization. It was the last bit of noise I needed to hear before I finally, after 12 long years, pressed the button my father had built for me. The button that shuts everything down. I am not the woman they see. I am not the quiet, ornamental wife of Daniel Hayes. I am the daughter of Harold Grant, and I was not raised in ballrooms. I was raised in the dirt and diesel fumes of the Aurora Yard. My childhood memories are not of cotillions. They are of sitting on a stack of new tires in the dispatch office, listening to the crackle of the CB radio. I knew our long-haul drivers by their handles before I knew my multiplication tables. I learned accounting from Sandra Webb, who would give me a lollipop to sit quietly and watch her run payroll on Friday afternoons. Marco Lewis, the yard manager, taught me to drive a forklift before my father taught me to drive a car. Those people, the ones whose names are now on Daniel's and Lena's termination list, are not employees to me. They are my inheritance. When my father collapsed on the golf course, the world, our small, insular Denver world, held its breath. And then, it turned its collective, pitying gaze on me. Poor, quiet Olivia, 25 years old, married for a year to that dazzling, handsome man. What would she do? At the funeral, I watched them, the bankers, the suppliers, the society women in their dark Chanel suits. They all swarmed Daniel. They shook his hand. They offered him their condolences for his loss. They saw a grieving widow, a pretty, fragile thing, and a strong, charming man ready to step into the void. Daniel, to his credit, played the part perfectly. He was somber, grateful, and immediately started using words like continuity and legacy. He sounded, to all of them, like the new king. The public reading of the will cemented their assumptions. Harold Grant left the Greenwood Estates house, a considerable portfolio of public stocks, and a generous trust to his beloved daughter. Olivia. I saw the looks, the polite, patronizing smiles. She's been taken care of. She's set for life. They saw a dowry, not an empire. And then, in the quiet of my father's empty office on floor 28A, Mr. Harrington showed me the real will, the one that gave me sole, indisputable control of Grant Venture Holdings. The truth is, Daniel was never my father's choice. He was mine. I met him 13 years ago. He was a junior executive at a logistics competitor, all sharp suits and a sharper smile. He oozed confidence. My father had been sizing up potential rivals, and Daniel's name came up. Too much shine, not enough tread, my father had grumbled after a meeting. That one loves the sound of his own voice. He wants to be the star, not win the game. After my father died, and I was sitting on the secret of my inheritance, I remembered those words. I needed someone to stand in the spotlight. I needed a driver who was so obsessed with the steering wheel he would never think to ask who built the engine. I looked at Daniel's resume again. I saw the overinflated self-importance, the desperate hunger for applause, the absolute core belief that he was the smartest man in any room. He was the perfect, dazzling scarecrow, as my father would have called him, a brilliant, shining scarecrow. So I had Harrington's office discover him. We offered him a position as vice president of operations. He accepted, believing the board had sought him out for his genius. 6 months later, I promoted him to chief operating officer. He was ecstatic. He was also arrogant, dismissive of the old guard like Marco and Sandra, and utterly convinced that all his success was self-made. A month after that, I agreed to marry him. The wedding was a strategic merger, but only I knew the terms. I gave him the name Hayes, and in return, he gave me the perfect cover. He became the face of Aurora Continental Freight. I became Mrs. Hayes, the reclusive wife, the society hostess. I hosted the galas. I chaired the charity auctions. I sat in the front row and smiled demurely as Denver Business Quarterly named Daniel founder of the new generation. He never founded anything. He was an employee. But I never corrected them, not once. I let him build his stage, let him bask in the lights, let him believe the company's success was tied to his charisma. At home, the performance soured. The more the press adored him, the less he saw me. He began to believe his own hype. The gratitude he once had for marrying the boss's daughter curdled into a kind of casual, entitled contempt. "You know, in this city, Olivia," he would say, loosening his tie after a long dinner where I had done nothing but listen. "You'd have a hard time finding another man of my caliber. You really are lucky I married you." He said it so many times it became a refrain. Lucky. It was a small, sharp blade he'd stick in my ribs, just to remind me of my place. I was lucky to be in his orbit. I was lucky he tolerated my quiet, bookish nature. I was lucky he was patient with my body's failure to give him a son. I swallowed it. Every time. I swallowed it because I remembered my father's letter, "People can only take power they can see. Hidden power can only be unlocked by its owner." Daniel's power was visible. It was loud. It was on the cover of magazines. Mine was silent. It was in a vault on floor 28A. And as long as he believed he was the king, he would never go looking for the throne. Then, 8 months ago, Lena Carver appeared. I did not vet her file. Her hiring package never crossed the fund's desk, which it should have. Daniel hired her directly, as Director of Strategic Branding, a position he created for her. He did it with his CEO authority, bypassing the holding company's oversight. It was a small thing, a minor HR infraction, but to me, it was a seismic alarm. It was the first time he had acted not just like the driver, but like he owned the road. It meant he had forgotten who paid for the pavement. He had forgotten who was paying him. Her arrival was not a romantic threat. Not at first. It was a corporate one. She was his first true act of disloyalty. He was so blinded by his own reflection and so enamored with hers that he had finally, fatally, forgotten his place. So, no. Tonight was not about the affair. The cheating is a symptom, not the disease. The disease is arrogance. The betrayal is not Lena's hand on his chest. It is his signature on a plan to destroy my father's legacy, to fire the people who are its true foundation. The humiliation at Echelon 32 was just the last drop of fuel on a fire that has been burning for a very long time. What I feel now, standing in this cold, quiet office, is not the pain of a wife. It is the cold, righteous fury of an owner. My fingers move across the hard-line terminal, the keys solid and responsive under my touch. The message to Harrington was the first part of the sequence. The Aegis Protocol, the system my father and Cole designed, is not a simple password. It is a digital 3-key turn, built to ensure no single person, not even me, could act rashly. A prompt glows on the dark screen, awaiting secondary authorization. I reach up and unclasp the heavy silver chain from around my neck, the one I have worn hidden under my clothes every day for 12 years. It is not a locket. It is a custom-milled, military-grade USB key. It is cold, as I slide it into a dedicated, armored port built directly into the desk, awaiting biometric confirmation. I press my thumb back onto the scanner embedded in the walnut surface. Awaiting final signature C. Harrington. I wait. 1 second. 2. Cole is 75 years old, but he is a creature of the night. A third second passes. Final signature verified. Aegis Protocol is now active. Grant Venture Holdings primary control initiated. The system executes instantly. It is not a request. It is a command that rewrites the building's digital DNA. It is a floodgate slamming shut. The first thing I do is test the lock. I open the master administrative directory. I find the user account D. Hayes. I click on his profile, his designation. Once CEO, admin level 1. Now reads, guest, class C, Read only. He is no longer an administrator. He is a visitor. I navigate to the core finance module, the one that controls executive compensation. I check Daniel's payroll file. Access denied. I check the wire transfer authorization queue. Access denied. I navigate to the highly encrypted folder on the M drive, the one labeled Project Aurora Ascent, where I know he and Lena are building the documentation for their shadow IPO. The folder opens for me without hesitation. I see the projections, the fabricated growth charts, the list of underwriters. I check the permissions for D. Hayes. Access denied. He is locked out of his own salary, his own projections, and his own golden parachute. He just does not know it yet. My next move is purely symbolic, but deeply satisfying. I return to the restructuring 2026 final file, the 120 slides of their new empire. I stare at the slide listing Marco, Sandra, and Arthur for termination. I right-click. I do not archive it. I do not save it for evidence. I select delete. The system, meticulous as ever, asks, "This action is permanent. Are you sure?" Yes. It vanishes. I open a new, blank presentation file. The template is the old Aurora Standard Clean, stark, black text on a white background, my father's style, on the title slide. I type Interim Executive Statement, Olivia M. Grant. I do not need 120 slides. I only need 3. Next, I go to the master HR database. I find Marco Lewis, Sandra Webb, Arthur Samuels. I find 5 other names from my father's era, all marked on Lena's hit list. I create a new designation in the system, one that overrides all other commands: protected asset, non-terminable status, authorized by primary owner. They are safe. They are firewalled from any action Daniel or his allies might try to take. Now, for the weapons. I navigate to a hidden partition on the server, a drive that does not appear on any network map. The folder is labeled J-Archive. Janine, my father's executive assistant, is the only other person with access to floor 28A. Daniel thinks she is just a harmless old woman who retired 3 years ago, content to water the plants. He has no idea she is my administrator, my archivist, and my most loyal set of eyes. The archive is a monument to her meticulous, quiet rage. She has been collecting everything since Lena's arrival. I open the folder labeled Marketing Expenses, Q3, Q4. I find the invoices. They are wildly, absurdly inflated. Projects that should cost $50,000 are billed at $200,000. Consulting fees for brand strategy that cost more than our new forklifts. And then I see the vendor names. Frontier Velocity LLC, Redline Cargo Media, Western Reach Consultants. They sound impressive. They also sound generic. Janine has already done the work. She traced the shell companies. Frontier Velocity LLC is registered to an address in Cheyenne. Redline Cargo Media to a P.O. box in Boulder. Western Reach Consultants to a luxury mail drop in Cherry Creek. All 3 are controlled by the same person, the sole signatory on their bank accounts. Lena Carver. She has been siphoning money for at least 6 months. She was not just planning to purge my father's people. She was actively robbing the company, using Daniel's signature as her key. I compile the invoices, the shell company traces, and the now deleted restructuring plan, which I easily recovered from the server's 1-hour shadow cache. I package it all into a single, encrypted file. I send a new message to Harrington. Cole, 9 members on the board. I want 9 hard copies, bound in black, on their chairs at 10 a.m. tomorrow. No digital copies, no emails. I want them to hold the weight of it in their hands. His reply is immediate. Confirmed. Sleep well. Ms. Grant. A small, flashing icon in the corner of my terminal catches my eye. It is the real-time access log. A high-level account is attempting to log into the finance server and failing. The account name D. Hayes. The location of the IP address Skyline Lofts. Of course, he is not at our home in Greenwood Estates. Wringing his hands, wondering where his wife went. He is at her apartment. He is probably celebrating, telling her how he finally handled the Olivia problem. He is probably trying to show her the IPO projections, the proof of their brilliant future. I watch the log. Attempt D, Hayes. Login failed. Attempt D, Hayes. Login failed. Attempt D, Hayes. Password reset requested. A new line appears. A beautiful, sterile line of code. Access revoked by primary owner. He must be staring at that message right now. Primary owner, a designation he has never seen, associated with an account he never knew existed. I look at that line of text, and it feels like the first clean breath I have taken in 11 years. It is a confession. It is an admission that he is, right now, trying to access company secrets from his pregnant mistress's apartment, hours after humiliating his wife. Access revoked by primary owner. I savor it. I know I cannot go home tonight. I cannot face the empty house in Greenwood. More importantly, I cannot risk him showing up, attempting to perform contrition. I cannot let him try his practiced, manipulative apologies, his "you have to understand" speeches. The Aegis protocol is active, and it requires me to be surgical, not emotional. I stand up from the desk. My father, in his infinite foresight, had a full bathroom and dressing room built adjacent to this office. It is stocked with simple, dark business attire. My size, updated seasonally by Janine. I strip off the ivory silk anniversary dress. I let it pool on the marble floor like a shed skin. I will not wear that color again. I shower, the water scalding hot, washing away the smell of Echelon 32, of Daniel's cologne, of Lena's cloying perfume. I emerge and dress for the morning, a sharp, black sheath dress, low heels. I walk back to the window. The snow has stopped. The city is silent. Asleep. I look at my reflection in the thick, soundproof glass of floor 28A. The woman looking back at me is not the one who walked into that restaurant tonight. She is not the quiet, tolerant, lucky wife. She is not Mrs. Hayes. The glass reflects a woman in a black dress, her face calm, her eyes cold. She is a shareholder. She is the primary owner, and she has just closed the books. I did not sleep. I sat in my father's leather armchair, the one facing the windows, and watched the black sky soften to bruised purple, then to a sharp, metallic gray. The city, coated in a thin layer of new snow, looked clean and sterile from 32 stories up. At 6:17 in the morning, my personal phone, silent all night on the desk, began to vibrate. The screen flashed, "Daniel." I let it ring 3 times, a sharp, angry summons in the quiet room. On the 4th ring, I picked up. I did not say hello. "Olivia." His voice was not the smooth, measured baritone he used for the boardroom. It was a raw, cracking roar, the sound of an animal that has found its foot in a trap. "What the hell did you do?" I held the phone a few inches from my ear. I could hear his panicked breathing. He was at Skyline Lofts. I could almost smell Lena's perfume and the stale champagne from their celebration. "What did you do?" "My accounts are frozen, my corporate cards, my network access, my email. I'm locked out." "Turn it back on. Turn it back on right now." He was ordering me. After the public humiliation, after the pregnant mistress, after the attempted theft of my company, he was still giving me orders. The sheer, magnificent arrogance of it was almost impressive. "I have a company to run. Olivia, whatever little game you're playing, it's over." "Daniel," I said, my voice low and cold, the first words I had spoken to him since the restaurant. "Don't you Daniel me. You fix this. You're my wife. You're supposed to—" "You are trespassing on my property," I said. The silence on the other end was absolute. He had been in mid-rant, and the words stopped him like a wall of ice. What did you just say?" His voice was a whisper, confused. He had never heard those 2 words, "my property," from my lips. I hung up. The phone immediately buzzed again. This time, a text message. It was not from Daniel. It was from Lena. "You think you're smart, don't you? Thinking you can lock him out?" I stared at the text, at the sheer, unadulterated cheapness of it. A new message bubbled up. You think you're better than me just because you married him first? I'm his future. I'm the mother of his child, not you. And then, the inevitable, clumsy threat. You try to hurt him and I will take you for everything you have. We'll tell the world what you are. A cold, barren, crazy bitch. We'll see you in court. I'll take this whole company as child support. We'll take this whole company. She actually believed it. She believed Daniel owned it, and that by extension, she, and the fetus, had a claim. I screenshotted every message. My phone also showed 4 new voicemails, all from Daniel, all logged between 3 and 5 in the morning. I listened to the first 30 seconds of one. It was the same as his phone call, a panicked, furious, sputtering demand. I opened a new, secure email on the terminal. I attached the screenshots of Lena's texts. I attached the audio files of Daniel's voicemails. I sent them to Cole Harrington. The subject line was simple. Addendum to divorce file. Section harassment and coercion. He would know what to do with them. The system access log on my terminal was a flurry of red, flashing alerts. Daniel was trying everything. He was trying to email the board. He was trying to call his allies. I could picture him, pacing Lena's beige-carpeted apartment, his suit from last night hopelessly wrinkled. He would be calling Marcus, his VP. He would be calling Peterson and Vance, the 2 board members he'd installed himself, the ones who loved his golf club charisma. He would be expecting them to laugh it off. Women, eh? Dan, my wife locked my cards once, too. Don't worry, we'll sort her out. But at 7:30, as the sun finally broke over the mountains, my terminal chimed with an email from Harrington. Subject deliveries confirmed. Message. All 9 members have received their morning brief via courier. Mr. Peterson's office called to confirm receipt. Mr. Vance's home office signed for his. They had the binders. They were, at this very moment, turning the heavy cardstock pages. They were seeing the ownership charts that placed me at 63.8%. They were seeing the fraudulent invoices from Frontier Velocity LLC. They were seeing the signature of Daniel Hayes authorizing payments to his mistress's shell company. Daniel's calls would not be met with camaraderie. They would be met with a sudden, cold, legal wall. Mr. Hayes, we have received the materials. We will discuss this at the 10 o'clock meeting. He would hear the shift, the sudden formality. He would be terrified. The phone buzzed. Another text from Lena. She was clearly trying to manage her panicked new asset. Fine. You want to play dirty? Daniel is going on live stream at 9. We're telling everyone the truth about how his crazy, jealous wife is trying to destroy the company because she found out he's finally happy. You can't lock us out of Instagram, you old hag. A live stream. How perfectly her... An appeal to the public, an attempt to seize the narrative, to paint me as the hysterical, vengeful wife. I almost smiled. I watched the clock. 9 o'clock came and went. The internet was silent. Daniel was an egomaniac, but he was not a complete fool. He knew a public live stream, without the backing of Cynthia's PR team, without the company's legal firewall, was suicide. It would be a public confession. His access to the corporate PR machine was locked, and without his company-funded shield, he was just a man in a mistress's apartment, scared. His next call came at 9:30. His tone was completely different. The rage was gone, replaced by something far more repulsive, his performance of reason. Olivia, he said. His voice was low, intimate, as if we were still a we, as if last night had been a simple misunderstanding. Liv, please, let's just talk. What happened at the restaurant? That was a mistake. The announcement. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. I said nothing. I just listened to the lie. Listen, he said, a note of practiced sincerity creeping in. You have to think about the baby. Ah, there it is. The human shield. This corporate nonsense. It's putting an incredible amount of stress on Lena, on the child, an innocent child. Liv, is this what you want? To put a baby at risk over what? Your pride. He was using his unborn child as a bargaining chip. He was trying to pivot this from a matter of corporate fraud into a moral drama, a stage where he believed I could not win. He was trying to make me the villain for attacking a pregnant woman. I let the silence stretch, just long enough for him to become uncomfortable. My pride has nothing to do with this, Daniel. This is about fraud. Fraud. What are you talking about? That's insane. That's a ridiculous accusation. You are trespassing on my property, I repeated, the words now feeling solid, like bricks in a wall. The conversation is over. I hung up again. I had one last message for him. I opened my texts. I typed one simple sentence, the words clear and final. You told me I was lucky you married me. Today, you will have the opportunity to review that statement in front of 9 other people. I hit send. I powered down my personal phone and dropped it into my clutch. It was 9:50. The meeting was in 10 minutes. I walked out of floor 28A. The heavy soundproof door sealed shut behind me with a solid thud. I did not take the private service elevator down to the lobby. I walked to the main public elevator bank, the one Daniel used, the one the entire company saw. I pressed the glowing button for floor 27, the office of the CEO. The polished steel doors opened. It was not empty. It stopped at floor 22. And a group of junior marketing employees got on, holding their lattes, laughing about something from the weekend. They saw me and froze. Their smiles evaporated. I am not the woman they see at the holiday party, holding a champagne glass, smiling vaguely in the background. I am in the severe black sheath dress, my face composed, my gaze direct. They murmured, "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes." "Good morning," I said, my voice clear and strong. It echoed slightly in the enclosed space. The doors opened on floor 27. The reception area was a sweep of glass and pale Scandinavian wood. Daniel's taste, all surface and no substance, his executive assistant, a young woman intensely loyal to him, looked up, her eyes wide with shock. She had clearly been fielding panicked calls all morning. "Mrs. Hayes, I didn't know you were coming in. Mr. Hayes he's on his way." "I'm not here for Mr. Hayes," I said, walking past her desk, my heels clicking on the imported marble. "I'm here for the board meeting." I did not wait for her to buzz me in. I walked straight to the heavy double-door entrance of the main boardroom. The battle was no longer hidden on a secret floor. I was bringing it out into the light. I pushed the doors open. I pushed the boardroom doors open at 9:55. The room was empty, just as I had planned. The morning sun, amplified by the fresh snow, streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of floor 27. Daniel's taste in design was all about blinding light and reflective surfaces. It was a room built for a performance, which felt appropriate. A large, sealed cardboard box, delivered by Harrington's private courier an hour ago, sat on the credenza. I opened it. Inside were 9 identical, 2-inch thick binders. They were bound in heavy, black leatherette. On the spine of each, and again on the cover, was a simple, stark red label, "Confidential, Fraud and Breach of Trust." This was not the evidence I had found in the first panicked hours of the night. This was the full, annotated anatomy of their betrayal, assembled by me, Janine, and Cole Harrington in a 6-hour sprint. I had spent the night on floor 28A. Not grieving, but dissecting. The shell companies Janine found were just the beginning, the real proof. The key that unlocked the entire conspiracy was in a single file I had overlooked in my first sweep: Carver Expansion West Corridor, XLSX. It was Janine's masterpiece, a meticulous, cross-referenced spreadsheet detailing 3 major federal transport projects along the Colorado-Nevada corridor. I saw our initial, successful bids. Then I saw the subcontracting invoices, and the subcontractor was Lena's Shell Company. The invoices were inflated by exactly 30%, a 30% gouge, siphoned directly from our operating budget before it ever hit the profit and loss statements Daniel showed the board. In just 2 quarters, I calculated the loss, $3.2 million. But spreadsheets are sterile. They show the what, not the why. Janine had also provided the why. From the server archive, she had recovered 5 separate audio files, captured by the automated recording system in the 18th floor marketing conference room, a system my father installed and Daniel, in his arrogance, never bothered to learn about. I listened to them, one by one. In the pre-dawn stillness of my father's office, it was Lena, speaking to an outside vendor. Her voice was low, confident, and dripping with contempt. "Oh, Daniel," she laughed. The sound was like glass breaking. "He's so easy. He signs anything, as long as I keep him properly. Busy. He thinks due diligence is my job." Another file. 2 weeks later. "Just bill it to the West Corridor expansion. He doesn't even read the line items. I promise you. He just wants the top-line numbers to look good for his IPO pitch." She wasn't lying. The final, damning piece of the financial puzzle was Daniel's own digital signature. He hadn't just been busy. He hadn't just been fooled. He was a complicit partner. His authenticated, encrypted signature was on every single wire transfer authorization, approving payments to Frontier Velocity, Redline Media, and Western Reach. He was so desperate to build a nest egg for his new life, so high on his own power, that he had personally signed off on robbing his own company to fund his mistress's slush fund. At 4 a.m, I had called Elliot Rhodes. Elliot was my father's chief financial officer for 30 years. He was a quiet, meticulous man with a spine of steel. Daniel had contemptuously sidelined him, calling him a relic, and installing his own modern finance team. But Elliot, like Arthur and Marco, was loyal to the Grant name, not the Hayes title. "Elliot," I said, my voice hushed in the quiet office. "It's Olivia Grant. I'm sending you an encrypted file. I need you." He called back in 20 minutes. His voice was not sleepy. It was a tight, controlled monotone, the sound of a lifetime of fiduciary duty being violated. "Olivia," he said. "He's bleeding the company. This is $3.2 million I can verify in 2 quarters. It's criminal. Where do you need me?" "Boardroom, 10 a.m. I said. "I need you to be prepared to present this loss." "I'll be there," he said, and hung up. But even the fraud, as staggering as it was not the kill shot, the true betrayal, the one that shifted this from a domestic drama to a federal crime, was in Janine's last folder. Vegas Summit, last month, the Las Vegas Logistics Summit, Daniel had insisted Lena go, representing Aurora. He had told the board it was vital for building her brand and modernizing our image. At 5 a.m, I called our head of cybersecurity. Another relic Daniel had tried to fire. I gave him a directive. "Pull every security feed you can access from the Summit Hotel's public areas. Time-stamped for the night of the 18th. Cross-reference it with Lena Carver's room key usage. I'm looking for a meeting." At 6:15, the encrypted images appeared on my terminal. They were grainy, captured from a high-angle camera above the main lobby bar. There was Lena, in her crimson cocktail dress, the same one she wore tonight. She was laughing, leaning across a small table, but she was not with a client. She was with Robert Vance, the executive vice president of Transcoast Meridian, our most ruthless, cutthroat competitor. And in the second photo, time-stamped 2 minutes later, she was sliding a small silver USB drive across the table into his waiting hand. I finally understood. Lena Carver was not a gold digger. She was a saboteur. She wasn't just building a nest egg. She was liquidating the company from the inside. She was stealing money out the front door and selling our most valuable trade secrets, our client lists, our bidding algorithms, our expansion routes out the back, the pregnancy, the public announcement, the marriage. It was all a distraction. It was a brilliant, sociopathic move to secure her position by latching onto the CEO, giving her cover while she bled the company dry. This changed everything. If I let this unravel, if I let Daniel try to cover this up to save his own skin, Aurora Continental Freight would not just be bankrupt, it would be under federal investigation. My father's name, the Grant legacy, would be synonymous with corporate espionage. My revenge was no longer about a broken marriage. It was about saving my father's life's work. This is what I told Cole Harrington on our 5:30 a.m. call. "Cole," I said, my voice shaking for the first time, not with sadness, but with pure, cold rage. "This is not a divorce proceeding. This is a restoration. I want them to read it. I want them to feel the weight of the paper. No iPads, no presentations. I want them to turn the pages and see the fraud, see the signatures, and see the photograph. Now, in the silent, sunlit boardroom, I walk the length of the massive, polished walnut table. I place the first black binder at the first chair. I place the second, the third. I walk down the line, setting 9 binders, 9 identical indictments, at 9 empty chairs. I keep nothing for myself. I have it all memorized. I walk to the head of the table, the chairman's seat, the one my father used for 25 years, the one Daniel so proudly claimed as his own. I pull it out. The heavy leather sighs as I sit down. I smooth the front of my black dress and fold my hands on the polished wood. I am not the wife. I am not the victim. I am the primary owner. I look at the double doors at the far end of the room. He will walk through them any second. He will come in, arrogant and panicked, expecting to see his allies, expecting to manage his hysterical wife. He will find me, in his chair, with 9 black binders waiting for him like coffins. The boardroom doors at the far end of the room burst open at exactly 10 o'clock. Daniel strode in. He had not gone home to change. His tuxedo from the night before was deeply wrinkled, his bow tie gone, the collar of his shirt undone. His eyes were bloodshot, his face pale and slick with a thin sheen of sweat. He was a portrait of raw panic and vibrating rage. He was so focused on his own impending arrival, so desperate to seize control, that he did not see the 9 board members already filing in behind him. He just saw me. He saw me sitting in his chair. He stopped dead in the center of the room. Behind my head, the silver logo of Aurora Continental Freight was etched into the glass wall. And just beneath it, in smaller, precise font he had never bothered to read, were the words, "A property of Grant Venture Holdings." "Olivia," he shouted. His voice cracked. "What is this? Get out of that chair. This is an executive board meeting. You have no right to be here." He was loud. He was trying to regain the room by sheer volume, to re-establish the hierarchy. "On the contrary, Mr. Hayes." A new voice, quiet and precise, cut through Daniel's bluster. Elliot Rhodes, my father's old CFO, stepped into the room. He was impeccably dressed in a gray suit, and he held his own copy of the black binder. Daniel spun around. "Elliot, what are you doing here? You're retired." "I am the acting chief financial officer of Grant Venture Holdings," Elliot said, his voice flat. He walked to the seat at my right hand. "And per the Articles of Incorporation, Ms. Grant, as the sole director of the Holdings Fund, controls the preferred stock and a majority share of this company. She is, in fact, the only person with the legal authority to call this meeting. The other board members, a collection of 9 of the most powerful men in Denver, filed in silently. Peterson, Vance, Caldwell, the men Daniel played golf with, the men he considered his allies. They saw me at the head of the table. They saw the black binders, one at each of their places. They saw Daniel, disheveled and frantic. Not one of them made eye contact with him. They just quietly found their seats, their faces grim. The power in the room had already shifted, and the battle had not even begun. Daniel was left standing alone in the middle of the floor, a plaintiff without a case. He scrambled to his usual seat, one down from the head, next to Vance. He found the binder waiting for him. He stared at the red label, "Confidential," fraud and breach of trust, as if it were a snake. He ripped it open, his hands shaking so violently he tore the first page. I let the silence stretch. The only sound in the room was the heavy, frantic rustle of Daniel flipping through the pages, looking for something, anything. He recognized. "Good morning, gentlemen," I said. My voice was quiet, but after Daniel's shouting, it felt like a steel blade in the silence. The room snapped to attention. If you would all please open your binders to page 1, the collective sound of 9 heavy covers opening, of thick cardstock turning. Page 1, I continued, my hands folded calmly on the desk, is the complete and accurate ownership structure of this company, the one established by my father, Harold Grant. I let them study the pie chart, the clean lines of the flow chart. As you can see, Aurora Continental Freight is, and has always been, a wholly owned operating subsidiary. The controlling interest, 63.8%, rests with Grant Venture Holdings. I paused, letting my gaze travel from face to face, of which I am the sole managing director. Caldwell cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. Olivia, Ms. Grant, this is not the structure we have been operating under. Daniel has always been presented as the managing partner. Mr. Hayes has been an employee, I corrected him, my voice gentle but firm. A very well-compensated employee, appointed by the Holdings Fund to serve as CEO. He has never, at any time, held a controlling share. This is semantics, Daniel spat. He had found his voice again, though it was thin and reedy. It's a legal trick I built this company for the last 12 years. I took it from a backwater trucking firm into a logistics empire. Which brings us, I said, my voice effortlessly cutting across his, to page 9. Please turn to page 9. More page turning. Then, a thick, suffocating silence. Page 9 was the first invoice from Frontier Velocity, LLC. Page 10 was the corresponding wire transfer approval. Page 11 was the scan of the contract. Page 12 was Daniel's authenticated, encrypted digital signature. I heard Peterson, Daniel's closest golf partner, let out a very low, very soft, Jesus Christ. Vance, on the other hand, was just staring at the page, his face white. If you will continue to page 47, I said, you will find a summary of the funds, $3.2 million, diverted from the West Corridor expansion project over the last 2 quarters, all paid to 3 shell companies. Elliot Rhodes spoke, his voice precise as a scalpel. Companies which I was able to verify this morning, through their incorporation papers, are solely controlled by a Ms. Lena Carver. Daniel exploded. He shot to his feet, slamming his hands on the walnut table. The binders jumped. This is slander. This is an absolute fabrication. He pointed a shaking, accusatory finger at me, his face crimson. You can't believe this. This is my wife. She's hysterical. She found out about a personal matter. A private dispute. She is jealous, and she is vindictive, and she is fabricating this entire insane story to ruin me. He spun around, looking desperately at the faces of his friends. Vance Caldwell, you know me. You have known me for a decade. You think I would steal from my own company. This is a marital spat she has dragged into the boardroom. It's pathetic. I waited. I let his accusations of jealousy and hysteria hang in the air. I let them all look at me, the quiet, scorned wife. Then, I looked at Daniel. My gaze was steady, cold, and utterly devoid of the pity he was trying to solicit. He is not wrong about the jealousy. Gentlemen, I said, my voice dangerously soft. The entire room leaned in, straining to hear. But the signatures are his. I did not raise my voice. I did not have to. You signed the wire transfer for the first $200,000 to Frontier Velocity on November 3rd, I said, my eyes locked on his. And you did it, if my timeline is correct, just 2 hours after you asked me to smile and host a table for your pregnant mistress at our 11th anniversary dinner. The air was sucked from the room. I had taken his only defense, my jealousy, and confirmed it, turning it into the motive for his execution. I had linked his personal depravity directly to his professional fraud. These were old-school Denver men. They could forgive an affair. They could not forgive this. This was a betrayal of the class, of the name, of the legacy. Daniel opened his mouth, A small, wet, gasping sound came out. No words. Elliot Rhodes stood up, filling the void. Given the evidence of financial malfeasance, gross misconduct, and a clear and profound breach of fiduciary duty, I move that the board vote to immediately suspend Daniel Hayes from all duties as CEO, for cause, pending a full, independent forensic audit of his tenure. Seconded, Caldwell snapped, his voice like a gavel. All in favor, I said. 9 hands went up instantly. Mine remained folded on the table. I did not need to vote. The motion carries, I said. Unanimously. You can't, Daniel whispered. Then he roared, lurching to his feet. You can't. This is my company security, he bellowed at the glass doors. Security, get her out of my office. Get them all out. The 2 uniformed security guards, Frank and a younger man, who had been standing discreetly outside, stepped into the room. They were both men my father had hired. Frank had been with us for 25 years. They looked at Daniel, who was pointing at me, his face a mask of primal fury. Then they looked at me, sitting calmly at the head of the table. Mr. Hayes, Frank said, his voice level and respectful. He did not move. He kept his eyes on me. Ms. Grant, your orders. That was the moment. That was the kill shot. The look on Daniel's face as he watched the men he thought were his employees, the men who drove his cars and protected his building. Look past him, through him, to me for a command. The realization that his title, his office, his charisma, his voice, all of it meant nothing. He was no longer the man giving orders. He was just noise. I gave Frank a very slight, almost imperceptible, shake of my head. Not yet. We have one more item of business, I said to the board. Mr. Hayes and Ms. Carver were, as you know, planning to present a restructuring plan. That plan is void. However, the need for corporate transparency has never been more apparent. I looked at the men around the table. This suspension cannot be an internal memo. We cannot allow Mr. Hayes or Ms. Carver or... I let my eyes flick to the last page in the binder. The grainy photo of Lena passing the USB drive. Our competitor, Transcoast Meridian, to spin this narrative. I am calling an emergency shareholder meeting, I announced. 48 hours, the main ballroom at the Summit Regency. I will be announcing this suspension and the reasons for it, publicly. We will get ahead of this, and we will cut the cancer out, starting today. Daniel made a sound, a deep, choked gasp. A public meeting. Shareholders. The press. He, Daniel Hayes, the visionary, the self-made man, the star of Denver's business world, would be publicly named, dissected, and discarded as a common fraud. He sank back into his chair, his body just folded. He stared at his hands on the polished table. The man who lived for the spotlight was about to be executed by it. His face, which had always been his greatest weapon, was completely undone. He looked, for the first time since I had met him, exactly like what he was, a small, terrified, empty man, exposed under the brightest, most unforgiving lights. He had been stripped bare, not in private, but in the very room he called his throne. The grand ballroom at the Summit Regency Denver is cavernous and cold. Despite the chandelier's dripping crystal light, every one of the 120 chairs is filled. I see the minority shareholders, the pension fund managers, the small investors who have trusted my father's legacy for decades. In the back, behind a velvet rope, a small contingent of the local press stands ready. 2 camera crews from the local stations, their lights off for now. A handful of reporters from the Denver Business Quarterly and the Chronicle, notebooks poised. They smell an upset, but they think it is about stock performance. They have no idea they are about to witness a dethroning. I am sitting in the front row, flanked by Elliot Rhodes and Cole Harrington. I am wearing a suit of severe dark navy wool. My hands are folded in my lap. I am perfectly still. At 10 o'clock on the dot, Daniel Hayes walks onto the low stage. He has had 48 hours to recover since the board meeting. The man who was a disheveled, screaming wreck in the boardroom is gone. In his place is the Daniel everyone knows and admires, the flawless navy pinstripe suit, the confident, camera-ready smile, the air of absolute, unassailable command. He has prepared. He has spent 2 days spinning his narrative, rehearsing his lies. He believes he is walking onto his stage to address his audience. He thinks he can still win. He taps the microphone, and the familiar sound thumps through the speakers. "Good morning," he says. His voice is a smooth, warm baritone, oozing charisma. "I am so glad you all could make it. We are at a pivotal moment for Aurora Continental Freight, a moment of unprecedented growth, and a moment where we must define our future." He paces, his movements practiced. He is the visionary CEO. "But before we get to the projections," he says, his voice dropping, taking on a tone of pained, noble sincerity, "I must address a personal and deeply unfortunate matter, a distraction, if you will." Here it is, his script. He is going to paint me as the hysterical wife. As some of you may have heard, my wife, Olivia, has been unwell. He sighs, a beautiful performance of a husband's burden. She has been struggling greatly with some personal issues, and in her confusion, she has made some wild, damaging accusations, born of a private dispute. I do not let him say another word. While he is paused, waiting for the room to fill with sympathy, I stand up. The scrape of my chair on the floor is the only sound. I walk the 3 short steps up to the side of the stage. Daniel's eyes widen. He sees me, but his brain has not yet processed the interruption. He thinks I'm coming to cry, to make a scene, to prove his point. "Olivia," he hisses, a smile still frozen on his face, though his eyes are full of venom. He makes a down gesture with his hand. "This is not the time. Sit down. You are embarrassing yourself." I do not look at him. I walk directly to the central lectern and take the main microphone from its stand. It is heavy and cold. I turn my body to face the 120 shareholders, my back to my husband. "Good morning," I say. My voice is clear, calm, and amplified. It rings through the entire ballroom, sharp as a bell. Daniel is frozen, a few feet to my left, a useless prop on his own stage. My husband is correct. We are at a pivotal moment, but he is mistaken about who is addressing you. The room is utterly silent. For 11 years, you have known me as Olivia Hayes, the wife, the hostess, the woman at the gala. I pause, letting them see me, really see me, in the harsh stage lights. "My name," I say, "is Olivia Grant, and I am the owner of 63.8% of Aurora Continental Freight, held through the Grant Venture Holdings Fund." As I speak the words Grant Venture Holdings, I nod to the technician in the booth at the back of the room. The massive LED screen behind us, which had been displaying Daniel's smiling face next to the Aurora logo, flickers. It goes black, and then snaps back on, displaying a stark black and white organizational chart. At the very top, a single box Grant Venture Holdings, Sole Director O, Grant, and branching beneath it, the subsidiary box Aurora Continental Freight. A massive collective gasp sucks the air out of the room. In the back, the press cameras light up, and the rapid, sharp click, click, click of shutters begins. I see Daniel turn. He stares at the chart. He has never seen it. His face, so perfectly composed, slackens. The color drains from it, leaving a sick, ashen gray. The legal architecture of my father's empire, displayed 20 feet high, has just obliterated his... For 12 years, I continue, my voice gaining strength. Mr. Hayes has been an employee of this fund, a CEO hired to manage my father's company. 2 days ago, after an emergency session, the board of directors voted unanimously to suspend him, for cause. The room erupts in murmurs. This is not a marital dispute, as Mr. Hayes would like you to believe, I say, my voice rising, cutting through the noise. This is an attempted corporate coup, a coup orchestrated by Mr. Hayes and his hand-picked appointee, Ms. Lena Carver. I am not shouting, I am projecting. He claims I am unwell. He claims I am confused. What he means is that I am no longer silent. He claims I am fabricating stories. What he means is that I have found his invoices. He is right that this is not about a personal dispute. It is about his authorization of contracts that exceeded his authority. It is about the $3.2 million he and Miss Carver siphoned into her shell companies. It is about his gross misconduct and his profound breach of trust. I nod to the tech booth again. The screen changes. The grainy, time-stamped photograph from the Las Vegas hotel bar fills the screen. Lena, in her crimson dress, the EVP of Transcoast Meridian, and the small silver USB drive sliding across the table between them. The murmurs in the room turn to shouts. My God, is that Transcoast? The story has been successfully ripped from the society gossip pages and thrown onto the front page of the Business Journal. This is not a divorce. This is corporate espionage. Daniel finally finds his voice. It is not the smooth baritone. It is a high, strangled screech. She is lying. She is not mentally stable. I told you, she faked those pictures. She is insane. She is doing this because I left her. She is a jealous, barren. He stops himself, but the word hangs in the air. And then, in the third row, a woman stands up. It is Margaret Finnegan, a formidable woman in her 70s who controls a significant block of shares. She is not looking at Daniel. She is looking at me. And she begins to clap. It is a slow, steady, deliberate applause. A second later, 2 rows back, another woman stands, then another. They are not clapping for a victim. They are clapping for a warrior. They have sat in these meetings for decades, been patronized, been told by men like Daniel that they were lucky to have a seat at any table. They understand this, not as shareholders, but as women. They see exactly what I'm doing. I raise one hand, and the applause quiets. Mr. Hayes's mental stability is not the subject of this meeting, I say, my eyes still on the audience. The security of this company is, his access, and Miss Carver's, has been permanently revoked. The board's suspension was the first step. But it is not enough. I look at the board members, sitting like stone statues in the front row. I am now calling for an immediate, binding shareholder vote. I move to permanently strip Daniel Hayes of all executive authorities, all titles, and all associations with this company, and I move to transfer all operational control to an independent oversight committee, which I, as the majority owner, will appoint by end of business today. Daniel is just shaking his head, muttering, No, no, you can't, you can't. He is trapped on the stage with me, pinned by the lights, by the cameras, by the 120 pairs of eyes. I look to the tech booth one last time, and I nod. The stage director, following my explicit instructions, hits a final switch. A small red light in the back of the room blinks on. It is not for the press. It is for our internal feed. Right now, in every office, in every dispatch center, in every warehouse from Denver to Reno, this meeting is being broadcast live. Arthur, the night guard, Sandra, the accountant, Marco, the yard manager, the hundreds of loyal employees Daniel and Lena had planned to fire. They are all watching. The entire world of Aurora Continental Freight is watching as the man who called himself king is publicly and permanently broken. I turn, slowly, until I am facing my husband. I step closer to him, but I do not lower the microphone. My voice is quiet, intimate, but it booms through the speakers, amplified for every person in this room, for every employee watching. You told me, I say, at our anniversary dinner, in front of your mistress, that I was lucky you married me. I let the words hang in the air, heavy as stone. I let him remember his arrogance, his cruelty. Today, I say, turning back to the shareholders, to the cameras, to my company, In front of all of them, I am proving the exact opposite. I did not wait for the shareholder vote to be counted. It was a formality. I walked off the stage, leaving Daniel standing alone in the sudden, deafening silence, a ghost trapped in the spotlight. I motioned to Cole Harrington and the board members. "Gentlemen, the Sheridan Suite, immediately." We filed out of a side door, bypassing the stunned crowd and the frantic, shouting reporters. The shareholder meeting was the public execution. This was the signing of the death certificate. In a small, sterile conference room on the hotel's mezzanine level, the 9 board members and I stood around a polished table. Harrington, ever prepared, had the documents waiting. They were simple, 1-page resolutions. "This confirms the board's ratification of the binding shareholder vote," Harrington announced, his voice the dry rustle of old paper. "And the immediate termination of Daniel Hayes, for cause. Those were the 2 most expensive words in corporate law. They were the financial guillotine. They severed him from his contract. There would be no multi-million-dollar golden parachute, no severance package, no vesting of his unearned stock options. He would leave Aurora Continental Freight with nothing but the wrinkled pinstripe suit he was wearing. A suit, I reflected, that was almost certainly paid for with a company credit card that was, at this very moment, being declined, one by one. The men signed: Caldwell, Peterson, Vance, the men who had been his golf partners, his allies. Their hands did not shake. Loyalty in their world is a financial instrument, and Daniel's account was overdrawn. The entire process took less than 5 minutes. I stepped into the hallway, my phone already in my hand. The adrenaline from the confrontation was gone, replaced by the cold, clean hum of logistics. I made my first call. "Frank," I said to the head of security, who was waiting in the hotel lobby. "It is done. Execute the protocol." "Yes, Ms. Grant." The protocol was a series of simultaneous, cascading actions I had authorized from floor 28A. At that exact second, Frank's team back at headquarters was remotely deactivating Daniel's ID badge, his access to the building, to the executive elevator, to the garage, all erased. The laptop he had left in the green room before his speech would be collected and handed over to forensics, and the Black Falcon, the custom, all-black company sedan he so adored, the one he treated like a trophy, the one he had used to drive Lena to our anniversary dinner was, at that moment, being towed from the hotel's VIP parking. Its GPS tracker would show it en route to the company impound lot in the Aurora yard. When Daniel finally stumbled out, he would find nothing but an empty curb. My second call was to the property manager of the Skyline Lofts. It was a formality. Harrington's legal notice had been delivered by courier an hour ago. "Mr. Davies, this is Olivia Grant at Aurora Holdings. I'm confirming you received our notice of lease termination." "Ms. Grant," his voice was high and nervous. He knew our fund owned the entire building. "Yes, terrible business. We received it. Unit 1012. It's a corporate lease, held by the fund. Correct?" "That is correct," I said, my voice crisp. "And that lease has been terminated, effective immediately, due to a severe breach of contract by the registered occupant. I have already authorized a bonded locksmith to be on site. Please have your team change the locks. The occupant's personal effects are to be packed and placed in bonded storage by 6 p.m. By 6 p. He sputtered. "Ms. Grant, that's very fast. The occupant is currently engaged elsewhere," I said, clipping the words. "He will not be returning, nor will his associate." I pictured Lena, back in that beige apartment, watching the live stream, watching her entire future dissolve on a hotel ballroom stage. In a few minutes, she would hear a knock. It would not be Daniel, coming to celebrate. It would be a building manager and 2 security guards, telling her she had 1 hour to vacate the premises. In the conference room, Harrington was already on his own phone, speaking in a low, authoritative voice. He was filing the emergency petition with the court, the one we had prepared 48 hours ago. This was not part of the divorce. This was a civil injunction, linking Daniel's personal accounts directly to the $3.2 million in fraudulent wire transfers. While Daniel was still absorbing the shock of his public humiliation, a judge across town was signing an order to freeze his personal assets, his private checking account, his personal brokerage account, every single credit card in his wallet. He was now, in effect, penniless. I imagined him trying to buy a plane ticket to escape. Card declined. I imagined him trying to hire a high-priced defense attorney. Card declined. He was a man without a company, without a home, and without a dollar. While Harrington secured the courts, I dealt with the saboteur. From my phone, I opened my secure email. I pulled up the draft I had written at 4 a.m, sitting at my father's desk. To Lena Carver. Subject: termination of employment. The email was polite, professional, and absolute. Dear Ms. Carver, this email is to inform you that your employment with Aurora Continental Freight is terminated, effective immediately, for gross misconduct. This includes, but is not limited to, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, embezzlement, and the unauthorized dissemination of proprietary company data to a direct competitor. I attach the relevant files, the invoices from Frontier Velocity LLC, the bank traces, and a single, high-resolution JPEG, the photograph of her passing the USB drive to the man from Transcoast Meridian. I hit send. Her leverage was vaporized. The baby. The marriage. It was all a strategy. Predicated on Daniel's power and position, Daniel was now a disgraced, penniless liability. She was a woman who had committed a federal crime, fired, with an infant on the way, and a partner who could not even pay for a taxi. She was no longer a threat. She was simply wreckage. My new PR team, Cynthia, Daniel's fawning consultant, had been my first official termination, had the press release ready. It went live on the wires at the exact moment the shareholder meeting adjourned. It was a masterpiece of corporate narrative. It spoke of a critical vulnerability discovered in the executive office. It praised the swift and decisive action of the majority owner, Ms. Olivia Grant. It carefully framed the scandal not as a CEO's betrayal, but as a sophisticated infiltration by a senior marketing employee, Lena, who had improperly influenced and manipulated the CEO Daniel. It painted him as a fool, and her as the villain. Most importantly, it painted me as the savior, the owner, the one who had emerged from private life to restore the integrity and protect the legacy of her father's company. I had seized the story. My next call was to our Human Resources Department. Pamela, I said, I am emailing you a file. It is a termination list that was drafted by Mr. Hayes. I want you to take that list, cross-reference it, and send a personal email to every single employee on it. An email, Ms. Grant, saying what? Saying that, by order of the owner, their positions are secure. Say that Aurora Continental Freight values their loyalty and their history above all else, and send a separate personal note to Marco Lewis and Sandra Webb. Tell them I am looking forward to meeting with them tomorrow morning. They will understand. This was not just cleaning house, it was rebuilding the foundation. I gathered my purse and my coat. I did not look back at the boardroom. I took the glass elevator down to the hotel lobby, past the reporters who were now clamoring for a statement, their cameras flashing. My only comment was, the press release speaks for itself. The work of restoring Aurora begins today. As my car pulled up to the front entrance, I saw him. Daniel was stumbling out of a side exit, trying to avoid the main crush. His pinstripe jacket was askew, his face a mask of gray disbelief. He was alone. A few reporters, catching the movement, swarmed him, shouting questions. Mr. Hayes, is it true you've been fired for cause? What's your comment on the $3.2 million in fraud allegations? Mr. Hayes, was Lena Carver your mistress? He just stared at them, his mouth opening and closing. The visionary. The man who lived for the camera. He raised a hand to shield his face and pushed, pathetically, through the crowd. A man with nowhere to go. I drove back to the headquarters. I drove back to the black glass and steel monolith. I bypassed floor 27. I went directly to floor 28A. The room was silent, just as I had left it. The adrenaline of the past 8 hours began to fade, replaced by a cold, clear sense of purpose. The storm was over. The purge was complete. But the revenge was not finished. The revenge was not just about tearing Daniel down. It was about rebuilding what he and his ambition had tried to destroy. I sat down at my father's desk. On the terminal, I drew up one final document. It was an executive order, authorizing a full, independent, forensic audit of every contract, every hire, and every wire transfer signed by Daniel Hayes for the last 12 months. The empire he thought he was building, the life he thought he had stolen it, had all been reclaimed by its rightful owner in less than 8 hours. I signed the order. The cleanup had begun. The next morning, I did not enter the Aurora building through the service entrance. I did not use the hidden elevator to floor 28A. I walked through the main glass doors, into the soaring, sunlit marble lobby. My new head of public relations, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Maria, met me by the security desk. The lobby, usually a quiet expanse of corporate calm, was a contained frenzy. A podium was set up in front of the massive, brushed steel Aurora logo. On the floor, a taped-off area held a dozen camera crews and at least 30 reporters from every major financial outlet, not just from Denver, but from New York and Chicago. I had called this press conference. I had spent 48 hours cleaning the house, securing the assets, and preparing the new narrative. Now, it was time to tell the world, in my own words, who I was. I walked onto the low platform. The explosion of camera flashes was instantaneous. A blinding, percussive wave of light. I stood at the podium, my hands resting lightly on the sides. I waited. The sea of shouting questions quieted to an expectant hush. "Good morning," I said. My voice was calm, amplified by the microphones. "Thank you all for coming. My name is Olivia Grant." I did not say Hayes. I would never use that name again. "You are here today because of a story of betrayal, but the story you have been told is not the correct one. The media, in its haste, has attempted to frame this as a salacious domestic dispute, a wife scorned, a husband straying, a company caught in the crossfire." I leaned forward slightly, my eyes scanning the room. Let me be unequivocally clear. Aurora Continental Freight was not betrayed by a husband. It was betrayed by a chief executive officer. This is not a story about infidelity. It is a story about fraud. It is a story about a man who was hired to be a steward of a legacy, who instead tried to steal it, sell it for parts, and defraud its true owners. I was elevating the narrative. I was taking my name, and my father's, out of the tabloid mud and placing it firmly in the realm of corporate governance. I was not the victim. I was the one who had stopped the crime. Mr. Hayes and his accomplice, Ms. Carver, were not just disloyal to a marriage. I said, my voice cold and precise. They were disloyal to our shareholders, to our employees, and to the memory of the man who founded this company, my father, Harold Grant. I motioned to the large screens on either side of the podium. You have all seen the rumors, the speculation. Now, I want you to see the moment the truth was introduced. This is from the emergency shareholder meeting, 48 hours ago. I played the clip. It was only 30 seconds long. It showed me, on stage, announcing my controlling share of 63.8%. It showed the organizational chart flashing onto the screen, but the camera, operated by my team, was not focused on me. It was zoomed in excruciating detail, on the face of Daniel Hayes. The entire press corps watched, in dead silence, as the man they had once called a visionary publicly imploded. They watched the blood drain from his face. They saw the confident smile curdle into a mask of slack-jawed, abject horror. They saw the exact second a king realized he had never, not for one moment, been anything more than a jester. The clip went viral before the press conference was even over. It was the definitive image of his downfall. I let the screen go black before turning back to the reporters. A hand shot up in the front row. It was a reporter from the Business Quarterly, the same one who had put Daniel on their cover as Man of the Year. "Ms. Grant," she said, her voice sharp, "there are persistent rumors, sources close to Mr. Hayes, that claim he often said you were, quote, lucky he married you, that he gave you your entire lifestyle. Would you care to comment on that?" This was the question, the one I had been waiting for. I allowed myself a small, thin smile. "That is an interesting perspective," I said. "However, the facts, as they are, tell a different story. I hired Mr. Hayes 13 years ago, after my father's passing. I promoted him to COO. I am the one who proposed the board appoint him as CEO. I let that sink in. I hired him before I ever agreed to marry him. The luck, I believe, was quite clearly distributed." A ripple of laughter, sharp and appreciative, went through the press corps. The narrative was cemented. He was not the benefactor. He was the help. I stepped back and motioned to my left. "I will now turn the podium over to our chief legal counsel, Mr. Cole Harrington, who will detail the new corporate governance structure." Cole, immaculate in a three-piece suit, stepped forward. "Thank you. Ms. Grant, to be clear, the company is moving forward with an independent oversight committee. Appointed by and reporting directly to Ms. Grant, a global search for a new permanent CEO is underway. The name of Daniel Hayes has, as of this morning, been permanently removed from all company leadership materials, contracts, and registries." As Cole spoke, I looked out over the cameras, but my mind was elsewhere. I was thinking of the dominoes that were, at that very second, falling into place. In a drab, pay-by-the-week motel room out by the interstate, a man who looked like a ghost of Daniel Hayes was trying to buy a cup of coffee from a vending machine. His fourth and final personal credit card was rejected. As he slumped in defeat, a polite, heavy-set man in a cheap suit approached him. "Mr. Daniel Hayes." The man did not wait for an answer. He simply handed Daniel a thick stack of folded legal papers. It was the official summons, notifying him that he was the primary subject of a federal investigation into wire fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement, miles away, in a small, borrowed apartment. Lena Carver was frantically texting. Her plan had been to use the baby as a shield and her competitor contact as an escape hatch, but her contact at Transcoast Meridian, the man she had passed the USB drive to, had just sent his final reply. "You're radioactive, Lena. You and that idiot CEO. You're a federal case. Lose this number. We never met." Her phone, paid for by a shell company whose accounts were now frozen, blinked once and went dark. Her last lifeline was gone, and in the Aurora yard, in the cluttered, diesel-scented break room, Marco Lewis and Sandra Webb and Arthur, the night guard, were all gathered around a small television. They were watching my press conference, the live stream feed. When I delivered the line about who was lucky, Marco, a man who rarely smiled, slammed his hand on the table and let out a whoop. "That's Harold's girl," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I told you she was a Grant." Sandra was wiping a tear from her eye. "Little Livy. She used to come in and pass out cookies from her lunchbox. Now she just saved the entire company. She saved our jobs." I came back to the present as the press conference wound down. The final questions were about projections, about the future, about the audit. I answered them all with calm, clear precision. When the questions were over, Maria, my PR head, stepped up. "Thank you all. Ms. Grant will now pose for photos." I did not pose in the atrium. I did not pose in the glass box boardroom on floor 27. I stood in front of the simple, massive, brushed steel logo in the main lobby, the one every driver, every accountant, every employee saw when they came to work. The press did not notice, at first, the new addition, but the employees, watching on the internal feed, saw it. Just below the gleaming Aurora Continental freight, a smaller, permanent bronze plaque had been installed that morning. It read, "Founded by Harold Grant, restored by Olivia Grant." My journey was complete. I had taken back my name, I had honored my father, and I had reclaimed my road. The true revenge was not in his ruin, it was in my restoration. I stood there, the cameras flashing, a silent promise to my father's legacy. Never tell a woman she is lucky to be with you. You should be asking if you are even qualified to stand beside her. Thank you for listening to this story. Comment below where you are listening from. Let's connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to Zoe Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.